The scent of damp moss and wildflowers clung to the air as I stood before the altar of stone, my breath misting in the cold. Every exhale trembled like a confession I hadn't yet spoken. The moon hung above the forest canopy, pale and merciless, turning the clearing into a place of judgment. Tonight was the binding night. My binding night. The silk of my green dress, too thin for the mountain chill, whispered against my skin as I waited alone. The women who had prepared me hours before were long gone now, their parting smiles sweet but empty. "You'll want to gather your courage," they had said, though what they meant was simpler. "He won't find it in you." They were right. I had none left. Somewhere deep in the forest, a wolf howled. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. My pulse answered, frantic and disobedient, like it knew the truth my mind refused to name, that I was not being wed tonight. I was being claimed. The pendant at my throat, the only thing left from my mother, pressed cold against my skin. I closed my fingers around it, tracing the carved pattern of entwined roots. She'd told me once that it was carved from the heartroot tree, a relic of balance and protection. "When the world turns cruel, Lyra," she'd whispered, "remember that even cursed blood carries its own kind of power." I had repeated those words 100 times since her death, each one softer than the last, as if afraid of what it might awaken. The ground trembled before I saw him. From between the pines emerged a figure draped in black and silver, his movements as fluid as moonlight over water. His hair was dark as the shadows, his eyes the cold gray of storm clouds caught mid-break. Armor gleamed beneath his cloak, steel and leather etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the light. King Rian Thorne. The Wolf King. The monster my pack had bartered me to. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He only looked at me long enough that I felt stripped to the bone. When he extended his hand, I placed mine in his out of instinct, not courage. His palm was rough, his touch grounding, heavy with something ancient. "You're trembling," he said. His voice wasn't cruel, it was quiet, assessing. "I'm not afraid." The lie fell too easily. Something dangerous flickered across his face. His thumb brushed against my wrist, and for a heartbeat, I swore the mark beneath my skin, the one shaped like a crescent scar, burned. "Don't lie to me," he murmured, low and soft as a threat. The words vibrated through me, deeper than sound. I met his gaze for the first time then, forcing myself to stand straighter, though the air around him felt heavier than the night. He held me there, still and silent, until the wind itself seemed to kneel. Then, without another word, he turned toward the altar. The ceremony began without witness or blessing. No vows. No exchange of rings or words. Only blood, mine drawn first, then his, each drop falling into the waiting bowl carved from black stone. When the final chant faded into the cold, the forest went still. Bound by moonlight and fear, I stood beside a king who would rule me not with love, but with truth demanded through clenched teeth. And though I didn't know it yet, that truth, the one he would force me to speak, was the only thing that could save us both. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. The journey to the palace was silent. Rian walked ahead, flanked by 2 guards cloaked in silver and black, their footfalls muffled by the moss-covered stones that paved the narrow path. The air grew colder as we climbed, the trees thinning to reveal jagged peaks beyond. I followed at a careful distance, my dress heavy with dew and ash, my hand still tingling from the mark left during the binding. My thoughts spun like leaves in a gale. What had I become, and where was he taking me? The fortress emerged from the mountain like it had grown there, stone grafted to stone, all harsh lines and iron gates. Moonlight danced across the ramparts, but no banners flew, no horns welcomed. This was not a place for celebration, it was a kingdom built for endurance. The palace's towers stabbed upward like spears, and beneath them, wolves roamed, real ones, their fur silver-tipped and their eyes intelligent, sentient. They watched me as I passed, unblinking as though they knew something I didn't. The great doors groaned open before we reached them, pulled by unseen hands. I stepped into shadow and firelight, the warmth of the great hall hitting me like a wall after the cold. Carvings lined every surface, snarling wolves, crescent moons, battles frozen in time. Above, the chandeliers hung like bone cages, filled with flickering crystals instead of candles. This place had seen centuries of kings, and now it had swallowed me whole. Rian didn't speak as he led me through an antechamber lined with columns. At its far end, 3 figures waited, each cloaked in different shades of black. One stepped forward first, a woman with streaks of silver through dark hair, her posture regal but unarmed. She bowed slightly, her amber eyes surprisingly warm. "Welcome, Queen Lyra," she said softly. "I am Lady Marin. The king has entrusted your orientation to me." My mouth went dry at the title. Queen. Not bride. Not Omega. I nodded but said nothing, afraid my voice would betray the confusion knotting in my chest. Rian inclined his head to Marin, then turned away without a word, vanishing into a corridor lined with iron sconces. His retreat felt like a warning left unsaid. The second figure approached now, a man with broad shoulders and a predator's gait. He stopped too close, the smile on his lips more like a smirk. "So," he said, dragging the word, "this is the prize they bound our king to." I stiffened as his pale eyes roamed too boldly, calculating. "Commander Valen," he added with a mock bow. "Forgive my manners. I was expecting someone less fragile." I didn't respond, though my jaw clenched. His presence coiled like smoke, thick and stifling, and I sensed he wanted me to crack. To react. I didn't. Marin stepped between us subtly, the movement as elegant as it was commanding. "Enough, Valen. She's not your prey." The third figure said nothing until the others fell silent. He stepped forward slowly, his robes darker than the others, embroidered with moons and vines in pale thread. He looked ancient, not frail, but old the way mountains are old. "Elder Thorne," Marin introduced, and I instinctively bowed my head. His gaze studied me not with judgment, but with weight. "The blood moves in her," he murmured. "But not yet the truth." "What truth?" I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes flicked to mine, unreadable. "The one buried too deep for you to remember. But it will rise." He turned to leave, his steps barely a whisper across the stone. "All things do in time." Marin escorted me from the chamber before I could ask more. We passed halls lined with ancient armor and velvet tapestries, the air growing thicker with the scent of wolf musk and something older, wet earth and roots. "You'll sleep in the Queen's tower," she said, as if that meant something. "The last one who used it was Rian's mother. Before the fall." Her tone didn't invite questions, and I gave none. The room was cavernous but beautiful, bathed in pale light and shadows that danced like spirits. Furs layered the stone floor. A mirror taller than me leaned in one corner, covered in a sheer veil. A small fire crackled in the hearth, throwing warmth against the cold. On a table, a silver cup waited with steaming herbal tea. I drank it in silence, grateful for the taste of something real. That night, sleep did not come. Not fully. I drifted in and out, caught in dreams that felt like borrowed memories. Vines twisting up my arms, trees whispering names I didn't know. Blood dripping from a root that pulsed like a heart. Every time I woke, my fingers were clenched around the pendant at my throat. On the third waking, I sensed him. Not as noise, but as presence. I turned, and there he was, standing near the hearth, silent and watching. He had changed into looser clothing, but the weight of him remained. His hair hung loose around his shoulders, and his tattoos seemed to shimmer with reflected flame. "You didn't scream," he said quietly. "I heard you coming," I replied. He studied me for a long moment, eyes flicking to the sweat at my temples. "Nightmares." "Dreams," I corrected. "Of trees and blood and things that shouldn't speak." His jaw tightened barely, but I saw it. "You're not ready for the truth," he said at last. "But it's already waking in you." He crossed the room slowly, stopping just short of touching me. "Your scent changes when you lie. Not just to me, to yourself." His voice dropped. "Don't lie to me, Lyra." "I'm not," I whispered. But my heart betrayed me. I could feel it racing, stuttering, confused. He didn't challenge the answer this time. Instead, he left without another word, and I was alone again, surrounded by flickering shadows and questions I couldn't yet answer. Over the next few days, the palace opened in fragments. Marin taught me how to navigate its labyrinthine halls. Servants came and went, always silent, always watching. Rian remained distant, appearing only at formal gatherings or when council was called. Valen was always near then too, a shadow at the edge of every conversation. Rumors reached me like smoke. Some whispered I was a political pawn. Others called me the beginning of an ancient reckoning. I pretended not to hear. But every time I passed the throne room, I felt something shift inside me. Like the stone remembered something I didn't. In the West Wing garden, I found solitude. There, thorn-covered trees grew wild beside dark stone benches. Birds did not sing here. Even the wind moved cautiously. But I liked it. It felt like a place between things. One afternoon, I heard voices before I saw them. Valen and a man I didn't recognize, speaking in clipped, sharp tones. "He's weakening," Valen said. "She's the reason." The other man murmured something I couldn't hear. "He trusts her too easily," Valen replied, "but I see it. She's not just an Omega. She's something older." My breath caught as I backed away. A twig snapped beneath my boot. Silence followed, then footsteps, fast and closing. I ran, skirts hitched, pendant clutched tight in my palm. I didn't look back until I reached the Queen's Tower and slammed the door behind me. My lungs burned as if I'd sprinted through flame. That night, I bolted the door. Lit every candle I could find. But shadows still crept in through the corners. I stared at the flame for hours, unable to shake Valen's words. "She's not just an Omega." When Rian came again, it was after midnight. He said nothing at first, just stood near the bed and studied me as if searching for something. I didn't speak either, I couldn't. Finally, he asked, "Did you wander near the war room today?" His voice was calm, but it carried an edge like sharpened steel. I shook my head slowly. "I stayed in the West Garden." A pause. I overheard something. His eyes narrowed, nostrils flaring slightly. He stepped closer. "Then you lied by omission," he said, voice low. I sat up straighter, heart pounding. What I heard wasn't meant for me. He leaned in until our foreheads almost touched. "Exactly," he murmured. "And that's what makes it dangerous." I swallowed hard. His breath was warm against my skin. "I don't know what's happening to me," I confessed. "I don't know what they think I am." His reply came like prophecy. "Then it's time we both find out." The throne hall was colder than it had any right to be. Torches burned low in sconces carved to resemble open jaws, but their light failed to reach the vaulted ceiling. My dress was thicker this time, woven in royal green with silver trim, but I still felt bare beneath it, exposed and unworthy. The hush of expectation clung to the stone like smoke as I entered beside Rian, his hand resting lightly against my back. His presence steadied me, but only just. This was the first gathering of the full court since our binding. More than 60 wolves filled the great chamber, warriors and nobles alike, each one sharp-eyed and sharpened-tongued. Their heads turned as one when we arrived, and though they bowed, I felt no warmth in it. Whispers rose the moment we passed, thin, biting things that didn't bother to hide behind pleasantries. Omega. Political offering. Placeholder queen. Rian led me to the long table raised above the others, where the throne carved of blackwood waited for him. He took his seat in silence, and I sat beside him, spine straight, hands folded too tightly in my lap. I felt them watching, Valen from the left flank with a glass of dark wine, Lady Marin across from him with eyes that softened briefly when they met mine. Elder Thorne, silent and unmoved, occupied a shadowed alcove near the high table. No introductions were made. In this court, names were currency, and I had none to spend. The feast began with fanfare, roasted game, blood-red fruit, flagons of sweetened meat. But the tension in the air soured the taste of every dish. Wolves spoke in low tones, laughter forced and infrequent. I listened more than I ate, careful not to react to every glance or smirk thrown my way. Rian said little, but I could feel his awareness brush against mine every few minutes, tethered, vigilant, watching. Then, predictably, Valen rose. His goblet swung lazily in his fingers as he stepped into the center of the hall, voice raised just enough to carry. A toast, he said, to our new queen, blessed by moonlight, bound by blood, and born under curious stars. Laughter flickered through the crowd, half nervous, half cruel. Some say omegas are nature's balance, he continued. Others say they're relics, wolves without teeth. I didn't move. The silence that followed was tighter than steel. My heartbeat pounded behind my ears, but I kept my face still, blank. Rian didn't stop him, not yet. Valen turned, gaze pinning me like a blade. Tell me, my queen, how long since you last shifted beneath the moon? The room shifted, energy tightening like a snare. I stood slowly, each movement deliberate, controlled. 2 years, I answered, my voice steady even as my stomach nodded. But I shift when needed. I don't need to prove myself to anyone at this table. A bold lie, but I prayed they wouldn't smell it. Valen's smile widened. 2 years? How strange. Most wolves feel the pull every full moon, unless, of course, something is wrong with them. A murmur ran through the gathered wolves, rising like the wind before a storm. Perhaps, he added, you'll demonstrate for us now. Let us see what kind of queen rules beside our king. My blood turned to ice. I glanced at Rian, but his expression gave nothing away. The court was watching, waiting. They wanted to see the truth or the failure. I knew what would happen if I tried. Still, I stepped down. Each breath felt heavier as I crossed the open floor, boots echoing on polished stone. I had tried before, in private again and again, but the shift never came fully. Pain without result. Fragments of fur and bone, but never the full transformation. I closed my eyes, reached inward to where the wolf should live. Called to it. Begged. Nothing answered. A cold sweat broke across my spine as the silence stretched. Still, I tried, pushing harder, teeth gritted, fingers curled into claws that never came. My heartbeat raced, my lungs tightened. I could feel them watching, smelling the failure on me, and then the laughter began. It wasn't loud. Not all at once. But it spread, snickering from the corners, thin chuckles from the tables, until even a few guards dared to smirk. I opened my eyes and saw the judgment in their stares. Not one wolf. Not one ally. Then came the growl. Not mine. Rian's. The sound silenced the room like a blade through breath. He rose slowly, power radiating off him in dark waves. Enough, he said, his voice quiet but heavier than steel. If any here question my judgment in choosing this queen, step forward. Otherwise, sit down and remember your place. No one moved. Valen, expression unreadable, raised his goblet again. Of course, my king. He returned to his seat, but the smirk lingered. Rian sat beside me once more, his voice so low only I could hear it. Lies, even quiet ones, can shatter kingdoms. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The shame had settled deep into my marrow. I stared at the goblet in front of me and saw only the reflection of someone unraveling. Someone they would never fear. The feast continued, but I heard none of it. Every clatter of metal and murmur of voices blurred. I replayed the moment over and over, the stillness, the emptiness where my wolf should be. Was it truly gone? Or was it hiding from something I didn't understand? Later that night, I stood alone on the balcony of the Queen's Tower. Moonlight spilled across the forest like silver blood. Below, I could hear the distant howls of wolves, real wolves running the border paths. I envied them. Envied the simplicity of wild instinct, unshackled by fear or failure. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't turn, but I knew it was him. His footsteps were silent, but the weight of him filled the air like thunder without sound. He came to stand beside me, gaze fixed on the horizon. "You're quiet," he said. I didn't reply. Not right away. Finally, I whispered, "They'll never accept me." The words tasted like ashes. "You should have chosen someone stronger." He turned to face me, one hand lifting to brush my hair from my cheek. I didn't choose strength. His fingers grazed the pendant at my neck. I chose truth. But tonight, you lied to them, to yourself. His voice softened, but the edge remained. "Don't lie to me, Lyra." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. Not because of what he said, but because he was right. I had lied. Not out of malice, but out of fear. I hadn't failed in the center of that hall. I had never truly believed I could succeed. I stepped away from him, retreating into the shadowed chamber. He didn't follow. The silence between us felt different now, not cruel, not cold. Heavy. Honest. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, arms wrapped tight around my knees. The wolf inside me, if it was there, was asleep. Starved, maybe. Or hiding behind doors I didn't know how to open. And yet something stirred. Not a shift. Not power. Just a thread of something. Deep and low, like the earth's hum beneath roots. A whisper I couldn't yet understand. I curled into the blankets, eyes open, watching the moon drift through the window. I didn't sleep. Not fully. But I dreamt again. And this time, the tree bled black. Have you ever felt the pressure to prove yourself before you were ready, and what did it cost you? If this story stirred something in you, leave a comment below. What would you have done in Lyra's place? The palace had moods. By day, it was stone and duty, filled with movement and murmurs that carried through vaulted halls. But by night, it changed. It became something older, alive, listening. It was during one of those listening hours that I found myself wandering, drawn by a whisper I couldn't name. I told myself I was only walking to clear my thoughts. But my feet had purpose, even when I didn't. They carried me down a passage I hadn't seen before, narrow and curved, lit by torches that flickered blue instead of gold. The air was colder here, tinged with a scent like rain and moss. When I reached the end, a heavy wooden door stood waiting. Its carvings stopped me short. Wolves, yes, but also trees, their roots curling into symbols that looked almost like letters. The moonstone inlays caught the faintest light and shimmered like water. I reached out and touched the door, expecting it to resist, but it opened under my hand with a sigh, as if it had been waiting for me. Dust swirled in the air, glittering faintly like falling stars. The room beyond was a library, though nothing like the grand archives I'd seen before. This one was smaller, circular, and wild. Plants had grown through cracks in the stone, vines creeping up shelves heavy with ancient texts. The smell of old paper mixed with soil and something faintly metallic. In the center of the room sat a single pedestal carved from tree bark, and on it rested a book. Its cover was bound in rough bark threaded with veins of moonstone. The book pulsed faintly when I approached. It wasn't an illusion. I could feel it, a rhythm, a slow heartbeat that seemed to match my own. I hesitated, fingers trembling as they hovered above the cover. Then, with a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, I touched it. The world seemed to exhale. The air rippled like heat over sand. Images flickered behind my eyes, forests burning, rivers glowing, women with eyes like mine standing beneath a towering silver tree. Their hands were raised, and from their palms, vines unfurled like veins of light. A voice whispered through the vision, soft and knowing. "Daughter of the grove, the blood remembers." I jerked my hand back, gasping. The vision vanished, leaving me dizzy and cold. The book now lay open to a page inscribed with swirling script I couldn't read, yet somehow understood. It spoke of the grove witches, women who once walked between spirit and soil. They were conduits of the heartroot tree, the pulse of the land itself. My chest ached as I read. Their bloodlines were said to be blessed and cursed in equal measure. Blessings for the world they healed. Curses for the weight they carried. And those who forgot their lineage, it warned, would live half-lives, never shifting, never whole. The words sank into me like roots seeking water. Half-life. Never shifting. The truth trembled beneath my skin, wanting to break free. My mother's pendant, the one carved from the same silver wood as this cover, grew warm against my collarbone. Somehow I knew this was her secret. I closed the book carefully, afraid to disturb whatever power slept within it. But before I could step away, I heard a voice behind me. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't shouted, it didn't need to be. The quiet strength in it froze me where I stood. I turned slowly to find Rian in the doorway. His presence filled the room like fire creeping into cold air. He wasn't wearing his crown, only a dark tunic and gloves dusted with silver thread. His eyes caught the torchlight, gleaming faintly like those of the wolves etched into the walls. "This wing was sealed for a reason," he said, stepping closer. "How did you find it?" I wanted to tell him the truth, that the palace itself had led me here. That something in me had followed the sound of its pulse. But the words tangled in my throat, half fear, half instinct. I was wandering, I said instead. I didn't mean to intrude. His gaze sharpened. You're lying. The words weren't angry. They were quiet. Certain. You always hesitate before you lie, he continued, stepping around me to look at the book. And your heartbeat changes when you're near the truth. My breath caught. You can hear that? I can feel it. He looked at me then, not the way he had at the ceremony or even during the feast. There was no power in it. Only concern. Whatever this is, it's not safe, Lyra. I stared at the book's cover, the veins of moonstone glowing faintly between us. It called to me, I admitted. I saw things, women, the heartroot tree, blood that burned like light. My voice trembled, but I couldn't stop. It said the blood remembers. That I'm one of them. His silence pressed like a weight on my chest. Finally, he exhaled. I suspected as much, he said quietly. When I first met you, I could feel something old. The kind of magic that doesn't bend, it endures. He brushed his gloved hand across the book's surface. The Grove witches vanished centuries ago. The Heartroot's fall was their doing. His words stung, though I didn't know why. My mother told me once that cursed blood can still carry light, I whispered. Maybe they weren't the cause, maybe they were the warning. His jaw flexed, but he said nothing. For a long moment, we simply stood there, the heartbeat of the book pulsing faintly between us. Then, gently, he closed it. You're not ready for what this will show you. He turned toward the door, his tone clipped now, the authority of a king returning like armor. This room stays locked from now on. Whatever secrets it holds have already buried enough people. He paused at the threshold. That includes my mother. The words hit harder than any command. Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone. The door shut behind him with a hollow echo that lingered long after his footsteps faded. I stared at the sealed wood for what felt like hours. Then, unable to resist, I reached for the book again. But the moment my fingers brushed it, it went still. Dead. No heartbeat. The light in the moonstone veins dimmed to ash. The magic had retreated, leaving only silence in its wake. Whatever I'd awakened, it wasn't finished with me, it was waiting. That night, I dreamed of my mother for the first time in years. She stood beneath the same silver tree from the vision, her face serene, her hands cupped around a seed that glowed like starlight. You can't hide from what you are, she said softly. But you can choose what you'll do with it. When I reached for her, she faded, and I woke with tears on my face. I found Rian in the courtyard the next morning. He was sparring with Valen, blades flashing under the sun like shards of moonlight. Their movements were precise, deadly, but Rian's strikes were sharper, controlled, efficient, a wolf pacing before the kill. When the final blow sent Valen's sword skidding across the stones, the commander bowed stiffly and withdrew. Rian turned toward me, sweat glistening against the ink of his tattoos. You're early, he said. I didn't sleep. The admission hung between us like fog. I hesitated before adding, you said your mother was buried by the same secrets. His expression darkened, the warmth fading from his gaze. She tried to bridge what should have stayed divided, he said quietly. Magic and crown. It destroyed her and nearly the realm. I understood then. Why he had sealed that room. Why the word witch still carried fear in these halls. You think I'll make the same mistake, I said softly. You think I'll destroy what you built. His silence was answer enough. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. Lies aren't always spoken, he murmured. Sometimes they're the things we tell ourselves to keep breathing. He reached out, his hand brushing the pendant at my throat. Don't lie to me, Lyra. Not about this. Not about what you are. My pulse thundered beneath his fingers. I don't even know what that is, I whispered. Yes, he said. You do. His gaze lingered for a moment longer, searching, unreadable, before he turned away, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his voice. And the truth pulsing in my blood like a forgotten song. There were places in the palace even the wolves feared. Rooms that didn't echo. Corridors where no fires burned, only cold moonlight slipping in through cracks too high to see. The Forbidden Wing was one such place, a place sealed by both stone and silence, spoken of in whispers and warnings. And yet, I went anyway. The dreams had returned, more vivid now. The silver tree bled in my mind, roots curling into my skin, eyes in the bark watching me. A reflection that wasn't mine, a voice whispering through the leaves, see what you are before they decide it for you. Each morning I woke shaking, with the weight of something pressing on my chest. Each night, the pull grew stronger. It was near midnight when I slipped past the guard post near the eastern stairwell. I'd watched the rotation for days, counting steps, noting when their attention drifted. A veil and hood masked my face, though I doubted it would have mattered. This part of the keep had been untouched for decades. Dust coated every surface. And yet, the air felt expectant. The door was carved from pale wood, ringed with a silver frame etched in vines. No torchlight reached this part of the hall, but the door pulsed faintly, like the glow of a dying ember. I placed my hand against the center and expected cold. Instead, it was warm. The warmth of blood and breath. It opened without sound. The chamber beyond was vast and round, the ceiling open to the sky, where the moon hung high and watching. At the center stood a mirror the size of a door, framed in twisted branches of petrified wood. The glass shimmered like water held still by spellwork. My pulse quickened the moment I stepped inside. The moon mirror. I had read of it in the Grove Witch's book, the artifact that revealed truth to those brave enough to look. Some saw their destiny. Others saw their destruction. Either way, it never lied. I approached slowly, the silence around me pressing closer with each step. As I stood before the mirror, my reflection gazed back, paler than I remembered, thinner, shadows under my eyes like bruises. But then it shifted. My skin darkened with ash. My hair curled like flame. And in my eyes bloomed gold. The image cracked and reformed. My hands became clawed. Vines twisted around my forearms, pulsing as if alive. A snarl curled my lips, half wolf, half something else. I staggered back with a gasp, my breath fogging the air. But the mirror didn't release me. I saw the heartroot tree again, only now it burned, its branches wreathed in light. Wolves circled it, howling into the fire, while a figure stood at its base, me, but not me. I held something in my hands. Something ancient. Something powerful enough to shake mountains. What are you doing here? The voice was sharp, cutting the vision like a blade. I turned, and there stood Valen, half in shadow, his expression twisted in suspicion. You were warned. His eyes flicked to the mirror, and his hand went to the dagger at his hip. You've touched what was sealed. I needed to know, I said, voice trembling but true. You've seen too much. He crossed the distance in 3 strides. I backed away, but there was nowhere to run, only the cold stone wall at my back and the mirror humming behind me. You're not a queen, he hissed. You're a curse in a crown. He drew his blade, the edge catching the moonlight. You've bewitched him, he spat. Twisted his judgment. Just like your kind did to his mother. I raised my hands to shield myself, but he came fast. Too fast. I didn't mean to fight. But something inside me did. The moment the blade touched air between us, the room exploded in light. A wind howled out of nowhere, slamming Valen into the far wall with bone-cracking force. The mirror pulsed once, then shattered. I collapsed to my knees, gasping. The energy that had surged through me drained just as quickly, leaving only a buzzing emptiness. Valen lay crumpled in the corner, unconscious but breathing. Around us, the shards of the mirror glittered like stars fallen to earth. My hands still glowed faintly, veins alight with green-gold flickers. Footsteps echoed beyond the threshold. Rian. He entered in a storm of fury and tension, his gaze falling first on Valen, then on me. His eyes widened slightly at the glow still fading from my skin. What happened? He demanded. His voice cracked, not with anger, but with something else. Fear. I didn't mean to, I whispered. He stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. His hand hovered near my cheek, not touching. You're shaking, he said. I saw myself, I murmured. But not me. He knelt in front of me, finally placing his hand over mine. It steadied the tremble, but not the memory. What did you see, Lyra? He asked, softer now. His voice no longer the king's. Just a man asking to understand. I saw a queen made of roots and flame, I said. A wolf, but not just a wolf. Tears burned hot at the edges of my eyes. I saw the heartroot tree burning, and me holding something I couldn't name. I looked up at him then. I think it was me, Rian. He exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for years. And then, for the first time, his voice broke. Don't lie to me, he said, but it was a plea, not a command. Please. And I didn't. Because I couldn't. I think I'm what your court fears, I whispered. I think I'm what you hoped I wasn't. He didn't move for a long moment. Then finally, he nodded once. Maybe, he said. But I also think you're the only one who can save us. He rose, helping me to my feet. The mirror lay broken at our backs, the truth already spoken. Rian glanced at Valen, still motionless. He'll tell the others, I said quietly. Rian's mouth curled faintly, not quite a smile. No, not yet. They'll learn the truth when you're strong enough to speak it yourself. He walked me back to the Queen's Tower in silence. Not out of coldness, but out of understanding. A silence that held weight and questions and choices still waiting to be made. At my door, he paused, his hand brushing my arm just once. Your power is waking, he said. Next time, don't wait until you're afraid to use it. I stepped inside, and for the first time since arriving at Moonborn, I wasn't entirely afraid of myself. The shards of the moon mirror would be swept away, the forbidden wing sealed again, but something had already changed. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones, humming low and restless. The mirror had broken. And the beast inside me was no longer asleep. If the mirror revealed the truth of you, your power, your fear, your future, would you dare to look? Comment below with your answer and let us know, what truth would you be most afraid to face? The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the mountain air had turned sharp. Each morning, the wind carried a bitterness that clung to the stone walls and sank into the joints of the keep like frost. Fires burned longer now, and even the wolves that patrolled the borders walked slower, heads low. There was something in the air that wasn't just cold, it was thinning. And the land, I was starting to understand, felt it too. Rian hadn't spoken to me since the night of the mirror. He'd left me at my door with too many truths and not enough answers. But something had shifted between us. He no longer looked at me like a risk. Now, he watched me like a clock running out of time. It was Elder Thorne who summoned me next, his missive delivered by Marin at dawn. Come alone, it said, and come prepared to see. The words offered no more than that. But something about them trembled against the mark inside me, the one that had started pulsing softly beneath my skin like a second heartbeat. I followed the pull. He waited in a circular chamber beneath the east wing, surrounded by moss-covered columns and carved roots in the stone. Torches lined the walls, but the light came from a crystal bowl at the center of the room, its contents a still pool that shimmered with silver beneath the surface. Elder Thorne knelt beside it, his age more evident in the firelight. Kneel, he said without looking at me. It's time you see the truth of the tree. I obeyed, folding my legs across from him. The bowl reflected the moonlight through the open ceiling above us, even though it was day. What is this place? I asked quietly. The memory well, he answered. It is tied to the heartroot tree, and through it, we glimpse what she remembers and what she fears. He placed his palm flat above the water's surface. Ripples spread from his touch, though his hand didn't break the surface. Long before thrones and titles, he said, there was only the heartroot, born from the goddess's last breath. She fed it with her sorrow, her longing, and from it, the wolves were shaped. The water stilled again, and then changed. An image formed ancient and fractured. I saw forests stretching far beyond the horizon, glowing with soft green light, rivers alive with energy, wolves moving not in packs but in communion. And then, I saw fire. And shadows that looked like men. The first betrayal, Thorne whispered. Not from outsiders, but from the crown itself. A king who sought to bind the heartroot's power to his bloodline alone. The vision showed the roots blackening, curling in pain. The grove witches fought to stop it, but they were silenced. I leaned forward as the image blurred, then sharpened again. Now I saw the present, our forests, but faded. Trees brittle. Rivers thin. Crops withering under cloudless skies. The heartroot tree, once glowing, now stood like a dying monument, its silver bark dulled to gray. She's dying, I breathed. Thorne nodded solemnly. And with her, our realm. Already the land rebels, shifting, trembling, withdrawing. He looked at me fully then. Only one of Grove blood can reach her. Only one who still remembers the old ways. But I don't remember, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know how to fix this. Thorne's gaze didn't waver. Not yet. But the power in your blood does. He reached out and pressed a dried leaf into my palm. And it's waking. I stared at the leaf. It was pale silver with green veins and glowed faintly against my skin. What is it? I asked. A piece of the heart root, he replied. It called to you, and now you must decide whether you'll answer. Before I could respond, a new presence filled the chamber. Rian stepped into the light, his cloak dusted with frost. He looked at me first, then Thorne, and then the bowl, as if confirming what had been revealed. You told her, he said. Not a question. She had to know, Thorne replied simply. She's not just a bride. She's the last hope. Rian's jaw tightened, and for a moment I wondered if he'd argue. But then his shoulders sagged, the weight of years folding over him. Leave us, he said. Thorne nodded and stepped out in silence. Only when we were alone did Rian speak again. The heart root has been weakening for decades, he said, voice low. I've tried everything: rituals, offerings, bloodline ceremonies. Nothing holds. Nothing heals. I stood slowly, the leaf still in my hand. So, this is why you married me. His eyes met mine, hard and unreadable. Yes. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Anger flared before I could stop it. I crossed the space between us, voice rising. So I was never a choice. Just a prophecy wrapped in silk. He didn't flinch, but I saw it, the flicker of guilt behind the king's mask. I was a vessel to save your kingdom. No, he said. You were the only one who told the truth. His voice was hoarse now, frayed at the edges. When I looked at you, I didn't see prophecy. I saw someone who felt the land the way I used to before the crown dulled it. He stepped closer. I didn't choose you because I needed you. I needed you because you didn't pretend. I didn't know what to say to that. Somewhere deep in me, something softened, but it warred with the sting in my chest. You should have told me, I whispered. You should have trusted me before the mirror broke. He looked down then, and that silence was all the answer I needed. For a long time, we stood in that chamber, the memory well casting our reflections in a flicker of silver. I saw him clearly for the first time, not just the Wolf King, but the man beneath the weight of a dying crown. And maybe, for a moment, he saw me too, not as a solution, but as someone who had her own roots, her own scars. Finally, he spoke again. The ritual to awaken the heart root could kill you. What doesn't hear? I said quietly. He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, but it faded quickly. It must be performed beneath the tree itself. On the final moon of winter. He looked at me, something like sorrow in his expression. 3 weeks from now. Will you be there? I asked, though I didn't know why it mattered. His gaze didn't leave mine. Every step. And for the first time, I believed him. Not because he said it, but because he didn't look away. Not even once. Valen woke on the 3rd night after the mirror shattered. He rose from the healer's chamber not as a wounded soldier, but as a wolf biding his time. The bruises along his jaw had faded, but the fire behind his eyes had not. He said little, bowed often, and offered quiet apologies to those who visited. But when he looked at me, something inside him coiled tight, something waiting. I watched him from the high balcony during the council's evening dispersal. He laughed too loudly with the other commanders, clapped Rian on the shoulder with too much ease. The court welcomed him back as a brother, loyal, bruised, forgiven. But I knew better. I could feel the rot beneath the smile. He passed me in the corridor that afternoon, his words low but sharp. Careful where you wander, my queen. Some wings hold teeth. I said nothing, but the pendant around my neck burned against my skin as if in warning. His eyes flicked down to it. He recognized the symbol now, carved from the same tree he once tried to silence me with. He didn't smile when he left. The snow finally arrived that evening, soft and whispering. It blanketed the palace in white quiet, muffling steps and secrets alike. I walked the halls wrapped in a cloak stitched with green thread, the same shade as the leaf Elder Thorne had pressed into my palm. I felt it still, thrumming low in my blood, the root of something awakening. I couldn't tell if it was strength or warning. At dinner, Rian sat beside me, but said little. He was brooding again, his fingers tapping patterns against the table as border reports piled in. The hollow Fong pack had begun to move. Scouts vanished from the northern ridge, and symbols carved into trees appeared in warning, ancient glyphs meaning claim or challenge. War was no longer a possibility. It was a breath away. "I'll speak to Valen," Rian said as the council adjourned. "He's been in the northern outposts before, he'll know what tactics they use." I forced myself to nod, though every instinct inside me clawed against it. "Be careful," I whispered. "He doesn't look at you the way he used to." Rian only sighed, exhaustion drawing shadows beneath his eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. The dreams had returned, burning trees, wolves at war, my hands covered in light and blood. I woke long before dawn and walked the halls in silence, the snow outside turning the windows ghost white. Somewhere deep in the west wing, I heard voices. Faint, urgent, not meant to be heard. I followed without thought, bare feet silent on the cold stone. The voices grew clearer, sharper, anger wrapped in control. I recognized Valen's tone first. "The heartroot's almost gone," he said. "We wait. Let it die. When the land breaks, they'll look for strength, not magic. And I'll be ready." Another voice responded, a hollow Feng envoy, by the sound of it. "You're sure the king won't see it?" Valen's reply was swift. "He's blinded. Obsessed with her. The Grove Witch's blood has turned his spine to silk." My breath caught, and I pressed myself tighter to the shadowed wall. "Once she's drained in the ritual," Valen added, "we strike. He'll be weakened. And I will take the crown, not as usurper, but as savior." The other man laughed low, cruel. "You've planned this well." "I always have," Valen said. "He just never noticed." I turned and fled before they sensed me. My steps were quick, but careful, the words ringing in my skull like prophecy turned poison. He would let the heartroot die. He would let me die. And take the throne by betrayal disguised as duty. Rian found me waiting in the shadows of the war chamber. His brow furrowed when he saw my face, pale with rage. "He's working with Hollow Fong," I said without preamble. "I heard him. He wants the heartroot dead. He wants you dead." Rian didn't blink. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't doubt. He only said, "What did he promise them?" And I knew then that he believed me completely. "Control," I answered. "Power, war, fear, he thinks that's all this kingdom respects." Rian's jaw flexed. "He's not wrong. That's what my father taught us." "But not what you want to be," I said quietly. His gaze locked with mine. "No, not anymore." He moved then, swift and sure, calling the guard to intercept the envoy before he escaped the grounds. But Valen had already vanished. Only his cloak remained, hanging on the hook outside his quarters. "Coward," Rian muttered. "He'll run to the Hollow Fong Alpha and tell them everything. Then they'll come," I said. And soon. That night, Rian came to my chambers. Not with ceremony. Not with walls between us. Just a man with shadows beneath his eyes and a question in his chest. I opened the door before he could knock. We didn't speak at first. He stood near the hearth, watching the flames as though they held answers he couldn't find. I watched him in turn, the curve of his shoulders heavier now, his crown more weight than symbol. "You've stopped lying," he said at last, without looking at me. "That makes you the most dangerous woman alive." I moved to stand beside him. "I only ever lied to survive," I said. "And now? I don't need to anymore." He turned, his eyes searching, and this time. I didn't flinch. "You knew before I did," he said, voice low, "that he hated what we were building." I nodded. "He hated what you were becoming." Rian's expression darkened, but not with anger, with mourning. He was the last of my father's loyal circle. The last piece of the old world I kept. "Then let it go," I said. "Let it fall like the leaves from the heartroot." He met my gaze, and there was something raw in his face now, something that hadn't been there before the crown. "Will you stand with me when the forest burns?" "I'll stand when it blooms again," I said. "Because it will." He reached for my hand not as a king, but as a man asking for faith. And I gave it. No oath. No blood. Just fingers entwined in silence, two roots twisting toward one purpose. The first alarm came with the dawn. It wasn't the sound of horns or shouts, but the vibration that ran through the ground itself, like the mountain exhaling in warning. By the time the guards reached the upper walls, smoke was already rising from the valley below. The Hollow Fong had come fast and, without hesitation, their banners black against the pale snow. And leading them was Valen, his eyes lit with betrayal and fire. Rian moved through the war hall like a storm given form. Orders cut through the air as steel rang and wolves shifted, their growls echoing down the corridors. I stood by the map table, the scent of blood and iron thick in my throat. Every path led to the same conclusion, the Heartroot Grove. "He's driving us there on purpose," I said quietly. "He knows the ritual must happen tonight." Rian's gaze met mine across the table. "Yes," he said. "He wants to reach it first, to burn it before it can awaken." His voice carried the finality of a prophecy already written. "We leave now." I didn't ask what he meant by we. I knew I wouldn't let him go alone. We rode out under a bleeding sky, the air thick with smoke and the sharp tang of fear. Behind us, the palace gates closed with a sound that felt like finality. Ahead, the forest shimmered in strange hues, shadows twisting under a wind that wasn't natural. My pendant pulsed against my skin, growing warmer with every step closer to the Heartroot. Something inside me was stirring, restless, ready, ancient. When we reached the grove, the battle had already begun. Wolves clashed in flashes of silver and red beneath the towering trees, the snow stained crimson where the wounded fell. The Hollow Fong fought with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. But this place was not made for war, it recoiled from it. The trees shuddered, their branches creaking like voices crying out. Rian dismounted first, his blade drawn. "Stay back," he ordered. "Your life matters more than this fight." I ignored him. The grove was calling me now, every heartbeat sinking with something beneath the soil. "It's too late for that," I whispered, stepping forward. The ground answered. Roots shifted beneath the surface, slow but sure, as if recognizing me. The air filled with the scent of sap and storm. Wolves on both sides faltered, heads turning toward the trembling earth. A deep, thrumming pulse rippled outward, felt more than heard. The Heartroot was waking. I saw it then, the great tree at the grove's center, silver bark dulled by centuries of neglect. Its roots sprawled like veins, reaching for me. I moved toward it, though the air around it shimmered with power that burned and beckoned. Rian's voice broke through the chaos behind me, shouting my name. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. When my hands touched the bark, everything inside me broke open. Heat and cold collided beneath my skin, light bleeding through the cracks of who I had been. The pendant shattered, scattering fragments that glowed as they hit the ground. My body convulsed, not with pain, but with transformation. I felt the wolf rise, but she was not alone. The shift wasn't like before, it was becoming. My skin turned to light, veins of green fire streaking up my arms as the forest's breath filled my lungs. My bones reshaped, but not into fur and fong, into something older. A balance between human and divine, between beast and bloom. The howl that tore from my throat was not rage, it was creation. Rian fell to his knees at the edge of the clearing, eyes wide. Around him, warriors froze as vines erupted from the soil, coiling like living serpents. They struck at the Hollow Fong soldiers, wrapping around weapons and pulling them to the earth. The grove fought beside me, through me. The Heartroot had chosen. Valen appeared through the smoke, his sword gleaming. His expression twisted when he saw what I'd become. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted. "You'll drown us all in your magic." I turned to him slowly, the air bending around my movements. "No," I said, my voice layered with something more than mortal. "I'm freeing what you broke." He charged, but the ground itself rebelled. The roots surged upward, snaring his legs before he reached me. For a moment, his defiance held a growl, a flash of steel, a final lunge. Then the vines closed around him, pulling him down into the earth. His scream echoed once, then vanished beneath the soil. When the last of the Hollow Fong fled, silence fell heavy as snow. The light still glowed from my skin, soft now, fading slowly. The Heartroot pulsed in rhythm with my breath, its bark brightening until it gleamed like polished silver. The forest exhaled, long and deep, as if a great weight had finally been lifted. And I fell. Rian caught me before I hit the ground. His hands were warm despite the cold, his voice shaking as he whispered my name. Lyra, he said, again and again, like he was afraid the sound alone might keep me breathing. My eyes fluttered open to see him above me, bloodied, bruised, but alive. The silver glow painted his face in gentler light than I'd ever seen. "You did it," he said, half in awe, half in disbelief. "No," I murmured, voice barely a thread. "We did." His thumb brushed away the soot along my cheek, his touch reverent. "The heartroot lives," he whispered. "So does the realm." The roots beneath us shifted one final time, cradling rather than consuming. I felt the lands pulse steady beneath my back. The forest whispered my name, not as plea, but as thanks. The light faded from my body, leaving only warmth behind. For the first time, I felt whole. Rian lifted me carefully, his breath visible in the cold air. The others stood at the grove's edge, silent, watching their king and the woman who had become something more than legend. "They'll call you goddess after this," he said softly. "They'll be wrong," I replied. "I'm just a wolf who remembered her roots." His laugh was quiet, but real. We stayed in the grove until sunrise. When the first light touched the trees, it caught on the new leaves growing from the heartroot's crown, green, alive, impossibly bright against the snow. The war had ended before dawn, but its echoes lingered in the wind. I looked at Rian, who watched the horizon as though waiting for something he couldn't name. "What happens now?" I asked. He turned to me, eyes soft, voice low. "Now," he said, "now we build something worth saving." His hand found mine, rough from battle but steady. And for once, I didn't feel like the sacrifice. I felt like the answer. When everything you are is torn apart and remade, how do you decide what parts of yourself are worth keeping? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you were Lyra, would you embrace the power that changed you, or fear what it might make you become? The war ended not with a roar, but with silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy, sacred, almost too fragile to speak through. Snow melted from the heartroot grove in a widening circle, as though the land itself exhaled in relief. Hollow Fang had scattered after Valen's fall, leaving only broken steel and unanswered questions behind. But none of it mattered more than the fact that we were still standing. By dusk, the bodies had been carried away and the banners lowered to half-mast. The scent of blood had faded from the wind, replaced by pine, wet earth, and something newly blooming. Rian stayed near the tree long after the others returned to the keep. He didn't speak. He just pressed one hand to the bark and watched the roots, like he feared they might vanish if he looked away. I let him be. For the first time, I understood why he needed stillness more than words. He had carried the weight of a dying realm on his back for too long. Now the crown hung lighter, but not gone. Just shared. When I returned to the palace, the halls felt different. Not quieter, just less haunted. Wolves bowed when they passed me, but not out of fear or obligation. Their eyes lingered longer, and in some, I saw something that hadn't been there before. Respect. Recognition. Marin met me at the entrance to my chambers, her hand on my arm before I could speak. "You did what no one else could," she said. "You brought the land back to life." I shook my head gently. "No. The land just needed someone to stop lying to it." Her lips parted as if to say more, but instead she smiled soft and sad and walked away. I bathed alone that night. The waters smelled faintly of ash and herbs, and the glow in my skin had faded to something quieter. Not gone, only gentled like a flame that knew it no longer had to burn to be seen. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a queen or a bride or a weapon. I saw myself for the first time. The moon had risen high when I stepped into the corridor. I didn't wear silk. I wore a simple tunic and boots, my hair damp, my hands bare. The guards at Rian's chamber door stepped aside without question. They knew where I was going. Maybe he did too. His room was dimly lit, the fire reduced to embers. He stood near the far window, cloak discarded, crown forgotten on the desk behind him. When he heard the door close, he didn't turn immediately. "I thought you'd wait until morning," he said. or not at all. I crossed the room slowly, the quiet between us thick with all the words we hadn't said. When I reached him, he turned. Not quickly. Carefully. Like I was a truth he was still learning how to hold. His eyes were tired, but clear. I didn't come as your queen, I said. Or your omega. I raised my chin steady. I came because I deserve answers. And because I'm ready to give them. He didn't interrupt. I don't need your protection anymore, I continued. I don't want your silence. I want you, but not if you keep pretending I was just fate's solution to your kingdom's curse. My voice didn't waver, though something sharp ached behind my ribs. You married more than prophecy, Rian. You married me. He closed the space between us in a breath. Not fast. Not hesitant. Just certain. I didn't know how to choose something for myself, he said. Not until you made me question whether I deserved to. I'm not a weapon, I whispered. He nodded. I know. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid of me anymore either, he replied. You changed that. For a long moment, we just stood there, nothing between us but the truth. Then, as he reached for me, I pulled back, not out of fear, but necessity. Say it, I said. Say the words you've whispered every night since the binding. His brow furrowed, but then softened. He understood. He leaned closer, his voice breaking as it had once before. Don't lie to me. This time, I didn't flinch. I smiled. Then stop lying to yourself, I said, my voice aflame in the dark. You didn't marry a weapon. You married your match. Something inside him broke then, not with pain, but with release. He exhaled like he hadn't in years, and slowly, almost reverently, he sank to one knee. Not in ceremony. Not in surrender. In recognition. His hand found mine, and held it like a promise. I see you now, he said, head bowed. Not because of what you are, but because of who you never stopped being. His voice was hoarse. Forgive me for seeing the crown first. I cupped his face in my hands and tilted it upward. No crown, I said. Not tonight. He rose, and when his arms came around me, I stepped into them like stepping into sun after storm. The kiss wasn't desperate. It was earned. When we finally pulled apart, the fire had rekindled itself behind us. Its glow stretched across the room, catching on the broken bits of armor and parchment scattered near the hearth. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said softly, we rule together. I smiled through the tears I hadn't known I'd been holding. Not rule. Restore. Outside, the moon passed behind a cloud and the room dimmed. But the warmth between us didn't fade. It deepened. It steadied. And it stayed. The heartroot blossomed with the season's first thaw. Where once its bark had dulled to ashen gray, now it gleamed silver and bright, pulsing with soft green light like breath beneath skin. New leaves unfurled along its crown, delicate, star-shaped, humming faintly in the stillness. Birds returned to its branches and small flowers bloomed in spirals along its roots, untouched by frost. The land, once brittle and wary, drank from the soil as if waking from a long, heavy sleep. Word spread faster than any decree. In the villages nestled between the cliffs, wolves stopped to listen to the wind, murmuring the name of the queen who healed the ground beneath their feet. Elders called it miracle. Scholars called it magic. And the people, the ones who lived in shadow for too long, called it hope. Preparations for the coronation began the following week, but this time, I did not wait to be dressed by someone else's hands or handed a crown shaped by other people's expectations. I chose green velvet, the color of leaves reborn, stitched with silver thread in the pattern of vines and flame. My pendant had been reforged from the shattered pieces into a circlet, simple, ancient, mine. I wore no veil. I had nothing left to hide. Rian met me at the edge of the council chamber. His armor was ceremonial now, gleaming black with slashes of gold, but his eyes were quiet. He looked at me like someone watching a fire, dangerous and sacred, needed and eternal. You're late, he said, though the corner of his mouth betrayed a smile. I was making sure I wore my crown, not theirs, I replied. The chamber was full lords, advisors, warriors, villagers, scholars. Even the elders from the outer territories had come, their robes dusted with snow. All of them rose as we entered, not because of law or fear, but something deeper. They saw a kingdom not rebuilt, but reborn. A king and queen no longer chained by prophecy or pride. We stood before the Hartrett's crest, now carved into the stone behind the council table. Meryn stepped forward, holding the crown in both hands. Not because of title, she said clearly. Not because of blood. But because of truth, we crown Lyra Vance, Queen of Mooborn. I stepped forward. I did not bow. The crown settled on my head like memory. Not heavy, but certain. As if it had always been waiting for me, and I had only just remembered how to wear it. Rian took my hand, not to lead, but to walk beside me. For the first time, we ruled not as halves, but as whole. The council resumed with new faces at the table and new voices in the room. We debated reparations, trade routes, and the reconstruction of burned villages. I listened more than I spoke, but when I did, the room stilled. No one questioned the sound of my voice anymore. I didn't have to raise it to be heard. That afternoon, the court presented the new royal vow written in ink, stamped with seal. I held the parchment, reading the carefully worded promises of unity and protection, of power balance between king and queen. Then I looked at Rian. "It's beautiful," I said. "But ours was always simpler." He smiled, the kind that didn't reach his lips so much as his eyes. I stepped forward and repeated the words that began everything. "Don't lie to me." His gaze deepened. "Then don't lie to yourself." We said it together this time, quietly. And the court, though they didn't understand, bowed just the same. Days passed with gentler purpose. The palace, once all sharp corners and silent halls, bloomed. Laughter returned to the stone, and fires stayed lit long into the evening. I walked the gardens alone now, unafraid. The forest no longer whispered warnings, it sang. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I entered the council hall early. The others had not yet arrived. The long table gleamed beneath the glow of lanterns shaped like pressed petals. I laid out maps, notes, and folded letters from village leaders, my hands steady, my mind clear. When the door opened, I didn't turn. Rian stepped inside without a word. He didn't speak. He simply stood at the threshold, watching me arrange scrolls and seal parchment. I could feel his presence like warmth on my back, but I didn't look up until I was finished. When I did, he was smiling. "You don't need me here anymore," he said softly. There was no sadness in his voice, only pride. I raised a brow. "I still want you here," I replied. "That's not the same thing." He walked toward me slowly, stopping just a few feet away. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he whispered, just for himself, not for me to hear, "My queen doesn't need my protection anymore." I did not reply, but I reached for his hand anyway. We stood like that as the others entered hand in hand, quiet, complete. No longer ruled by fear. No longer defined by past failures or whispered prophecy. Just two wolves who had chosen each other in the middle of ruin and built something worth guarding. Not with teeth, but with truth. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.